What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
Miller.
And we have an album review for you. So, one that was coming out on the 3rd of February to kick off February, a short month full of hopefully brutal music, was the latest offering from All Out War, Celestial Rot. This again comes out on the 3rd of February on Translation Lost Records. This band formed in 1990 in Newborough, New York. This is their 9th full-length overall, and I've been a fan of them for a long time. Like, I was a big fan of fucking Victory Records hardcore. I fucking pretty much cut my teeth on hardcore in general on that label. And this was one of the bands I got into. And the one thing that I noticed about these guys versus a fair amount of other hardcore bands was, man, these guys kind of sound evil. Like, most of the time you think of hardcore as like, yeah, it's shut the fuck up or I'll fucking punch you sort of music. And these guys are, we might do that, but we also might get into, like, you know, some Slayer and some seances and some evil shit. You want to watch some horror movies and hang out? It's a kind of a different vibe, and they've always been like this just peaked aggression sort of band, like just like a fucking dog trying to rip itself off the fucking chain so it can maul 8 or 9 toddlers.
See, and I'm not overly huge fan of hardcore in general, so I kind of didn't get into that scene at all. I've heard of these guys throughout the years and heard them, you know, at your house, jamming, whatever, here and there. Rin, I know I've heard them through him, but never dove into them, never really listened to an entire album. And this is the first one I've done, and I was thoroughly surprised. When I think of hardcore, I didn't think of the tones and the feelings that were coming out of this album, which you said were dark.
Yeah,
really got this kind of dark edge to them, but they do hit all of those typical kind of hardcore notes enough to be a hardcore band, I guess.
Yeah. All right. I'll be honest, like right away, like, even for All Out War, which I think is one of the thrashiest, most aggressive hardcore bands, you know, out there, their style is often called Slayercore. There's a fucking goddamn good reason, because they love fucking Slayer and those Slayer riffs come out. But this, I think, embraces even more extremity. Like, their last couple albums were definitely heavier than fuck. I mean, all their albums are heavier than fuck. But this one feels more steeped in, like, elements of death metal, black metal. I would even say it kind of borders on grindcore at times. It's just a vicious, fast album. The opening track, Snake Legion, right away it's just aggressive as hell. You have almost blackened tremolo riffs and blast beats. And blast beats aren't completely unheard of in All Out War, but this is generally a band you would associate more with, like, sort of thrashy D beats and such. Like, these are full-on, very aggressive blast beats, and these riffs are dark and sinister.
Yeah, and they use a lot of blast beats for what you're describing as what they've done in the past, and there's a lot of blast beats on here. And in Snake Legion, they do this cool spot too, or they have this cool spot where the guitars kind of go into this groove, and the drums just pop, 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 and keep the intensity maintaining throughout that riff with the guitars kind of grooving out. It was a really cool vibe to that part of the song.
Yeah, and I mean, all over here, like, of course, you get, like, what you would expect from All Out War. I mean, hyper-aggressive, thrashy sections, breakdowns that you can feel coming. This band has always been good about leading in a breakdown, whether it's those giant fucking tom hits or just sort of isolating a riff with isolated vocals on top of that, and then just boom, it hits. Lots of groove, lots of chug. But it's the, again, sort of bleaker atmosphere in here. Like, these guys are no stranger to darkness. A lot of their themes, you know, kind of going after religion and just sort of darker, more sinister subjects. But on this one, I think the music kind of matches up with the themes even more so, because I think the hardcore side of them is sort of pushed back in favor of even more extreme stuff.
And the extreme aspects of this album is what really I didn't expect, coming from a description of what you were telling me. It was a little evil and stuff like that or whatever, but there's just a lot of intensity to this album for being hardcore. A lot of death metal elements to it.
Yeah, songs like Caustic Abomination and the title track. The title track especially. The title track sounds like Slayer with a different vocalist for the first part of it. Like, comes in just with a massive dick-kicking, fast, thrashy riff. It's fucking going off, and then it kind of goes into this very Morbid Angel style breakdown. Like, the riffs are more sludgy, they're kind of slithering and crawling, The vocals get a lot deeper on there. They actually have more death metal roars, which death metal roars do pop up on here intermittently, but this is one of the moments where they're firmly isolated just to give this moment a flat-out death metal vibe. And Caustic Abomination, the song is just explosive as hell, which could be used as a descriptor for this entire album.
Yeah, absolutely.
Blasts right away, but towards the end, it locks on this really cool groove with a more death metal tremolo riff. Again, like kind of dark, kind of ugly sounding, but packs this hardcore groove. And man, like I really wasn't expecting more death metal elements or black metal elements on here, but they worked them in really well. Like it adds a lot to the atmosphere. There's like church bells and stuff sort of scattered on the album, more dissonant riffs. It gives this album a much more sinister feel than I think they've had on past releases.
Yeah, and while maintaining that like kind of driving, pounding, punch you in the face kind of riffage and feeling to the drums and everything, and just like in Caustic Abomination, that's a very good example of that, where it's a really driving in your face riff throughout the whole thing, and that song is badass. But in that song, they have some changes which are a little abrupt.
Honestly, like some of their shifts in terms of like tempos and just like dynamics in general remind me a lot of Autopsy, like that turn on a dime,
yeah.
like going from fast, thrashy death metal with a little bit of a punk fucking feel to it to kind of slow and doomy, except they don't go necessarily like a doom breakdown. It's a flat out hardcore breakdown with like syncopated riffs. But it's kind of interesting, like the breakdowns can be a little bit different. Like sometimes you get more of a straight up like hardcore breakdown, like the ones you're very familiar with, syncopated, open chugs. You know, that's kind of standard fare. We expect that from hardcore, and it works fucking every time.
But I think some of the difference between even the comparison to Autopsy would be like in this, it's like they really feel, those changes feel almost disjointed, whereas Autopsy, they're abrupt and they happen, but those two riffs or ideas kind of mingle a little bit with it one another to kind of make that transition a little bit more favorable for the ear. But these the some of the riffs just don't even seem like they gel well together, where it seems like that is more abrupt than like with Autopsy.
And I feel that's kind of partially due to like the song lengths and the album length too. This is under half an hour, like it's just a little bit over 25 minutes. And the songs are relatively short, so you have a lot of condensed ideas, and some of them do run into each other. It's all sort of at a fever pitch. It's a bullet train paced album. There are no fucking breaks on here. This just pretty much runs over everything in its path. But, you know, there's something to be said for that sort of dimed energy, because at no point does this feel like it wanes on energy at all. But sometimes it feels like it's just, you know, it needs a little bit of control sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's like they have like, you know, X amount of ideas in what they want to do with a riff, and they just kind of intermix between those ideas and hit those certain things that they want to do, but they just kind of like stick to those and just kind of stick to that throughout the album. So it does, especially in the second half of the album, start to get that repetitive feel to it, especially when you start noticing those abrupt changes in some of those riffs.
And when they start adding like different sort of tags to like the breakdowns, I think that kind of keeps them fresh. Like notably, Shroud of Heaven, the last track, has this really cool dissonant melody that is incorporated in the large chuggy breakdown at the end. And I like the whole shift from the opening with its black metal sort of tremolos and blasts to more of a thrash centric sort of chuggy riff. It's when they sort of change over like that. Like I think the blackened elements on here really set up the atmosphere. Make sure you know, like, yeah, no, we're serious about, you know, some dark shit right now. But the thrashy elements kind of keep the energy spiked, and then those death metal elements and breakdowns like just kind of, you know, knock the heaviness up. It's just a lot of these songs kind of repeat that formula. I would say, like, at its core, this is definitely still a hardcore album. Like, that is still sort of the central focus. It's just, I think the extreme metal elements have kind of like taken over, but that also kind of spices up their, you know, brand a little bit, because I would say like this is one of the heaviest albums they've ever fucking put out.
And also I kind of dig that you get little solos here. That inlays a little bit of a problem too with the production, but because in Weaving Oblivion, it's like second to last song, I think. That's the first time you really hear the guitar solo. There's points in the earlier part of the album where they hint at them, and you can kind of hear them in the background, but the vocals are mixed really high in it, and he does a lot of layering. When that happens, all that stuff is kind of like in line with where the guitars sit in the mix. When all those vocal layers come in, it kind of kills the guitars off. But Weave in Oblivion, you could actually hear the solo, and it was good. It was a nice little snippet of some riffage there, and it was enjoyable. But get some of that stuff working at the beginning part of the album, especially because it'll just add to the dynamics of the album.
It started off more like a lead melody, like it was like, all right, this is going to be like the lead melody that will complement the riff. Like, all right, that's cool. But then it actually sort of morphs into like a legit solo. And I think that's like one of the few spots where it actually does that. Most of the time it's like sort of a lead accompaniment. You know, of course, like dive bombs and fucking squeals and shit. I think that may be
the only spot where that's really a solo break.
There were some other like melodies, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a solo, but like a lead maybe. But
they're good. Do more. Put more of them in there.
But
just
I definitely,
a little pepper.
Yeah, I definitely had an issue with the vocals being up so high in the mix because, like, dude's loud. Like, he's got this really gnarly fucking scream. Again, kind of, you know, a little bit unique in terms of, like, hardcore because, again, there's, like, a more of a sinister tone to it.
Yeah,
and
he's got a lot of presence to his voice.
Oh,
he's loud anyway, and you don't need him too high up. He's got the presence. He's got that oomph. You know, a good lead singer should have. So
especially when you're layering him with like death growls behind him, and then like the occasional like I think there's a section where there's at least 3 voices on there, like sort of just occupying every vocal level they can. But I think the fact that either the vocals are just too high in the mix and the guitars are too low, or just the guitars are too low, and I don't know, like there's something about that. Like I think the guitars should maybe be a little bit more present, and the vocals should be walked back a little bit. I think the drums sound excellent on here. Like they are fucking popping. Like this dude is wailing on his kit, and it's probably gonna press charges. I know I've made that joke before, but it sounds legit. Like he's beating the fucking snot out of that shit.
They can definitely hear it through there. They're good. The main vocals are good. So obviously you're hearing it. You want to crank shit up, man. It's good, but don't do it at the sacrifice of the other instruments, which are equally as good.
Yeah, and the guitars really drive the songs, because I think there's a lot of cool riff ideas here.
Fuck yeah, there is.
And again, pulling from all these different camps to really kind of come up with something, I would say, fairly unique here with the blend of different elements. Like, this is still, like, comparable to bands like Terror and Ringworm. I would say Ringworm especially, because Ringworm's always been kind of that, like, evil hardcore band, and it's a little bit of Cleveland love there, too. But the fact that this has, again, like, this more dark, foreboding feel, and it kind of steps outside of a lot of hardcore norms, like the regular tropes and such, I think that keeps this band really interesting, and honestly keeps me coming back. My main issues on here are definitely more along the lines of production, and I do think abrupt changes, because it's both helped and kind of harmed by the fact that it's a short offering, because I feel like parts of it are so condensed where songs could use a little bit of room to breathe. Because, again, there isn't a moment on here where it's not just fucking flying. Like, even lead-ins to breakdowns, like, you can still feel the fever pitch build up.
That ambient energy over that.
There's not a lot of, like, quiet moments on here at all in terms of space between tracks. It's one after the other after the other. Almost like a fucking hardcore show where they're just told, like, yeah, you only have this long to play, so don't talk to anybody.
Half-hour set, man.
I'm like, all right.
25:38, there you go, sir.
We'll get it done in 22. Fuck this shit up, let's go. But yeah, overall, I thought this was a pretty fucking solid listen, and overall, I think I'm going to give it a 3. This was a good album. Not without its, missteps, I think maybe in the production and maybe in the pacing of it. But at the same time, the pacing of it is kind of the thing that kind of keeps it dimed at all times. Because this is just a violent fucking album. There are no breaks on it. It is possibly one of their heaviest albums, I think. Like, there is just something about this that feels more visceral than possibly some of their past albums. And I love a lot of their stuff. I think embracing more of that black metal atmosphere adds quite a bit. Like, it makes it feel even more dark and sinister. I like the death metal elements and the grooves, but man, when they get down to those just flat out gnarly breakdowns, that is still going to be one of the strengths of this band, and something that hardcore has built a solid foundation on and makes it so much fucking fun to listen to. But yeah, this is a solid album. I recommend checking it out. Again, if you're a fan of bands like Terror and Ringworm especially, you're probably going to dig this.
And I'm going to bump it up a little bit, 3.5 out of 5, because it caught me off guard. I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not a big fan of, like, hardcore and stuff, but this had, like, a blackened edge to it, or if you want to, whatever the fuck,
got 'em.
But it's got a unique flair to it that I kind of dig, because I'm getting a little bit more into black metal as these black metal bands are coming around to production and like sounding good and hearing what you're playing, stuff that matters when you're listening to it. So I'm getting into more of that vibe, that black metal vibe. So maybe this album at this time is really kind of vibing with me more than it would be. And the pitfalls of like the vocals being up is not really, it's there for me, but I don't mind the guy's vocals. You can understand what he's saying for the most part, and it's he's got enough presence and like oomph to him that it keeps me engaged as a listener, even though I may not be able to understand what he's saying. Which all overall 3.5 out of 5. Like I said, it caught me off guard, mainly why I bumped it up a little bit. But it's a solid album, and if you're into like the hardcore stuff and especially if you're into that anyway, and you kind of venture in the death metal. This is right up your alley, and it's something that you probably already have and have listened to, I'm sure. If you haven't, pick it up. It's worth a listen to, at least, for sure.
Honestly, I bring this up every now and then that I think black metal as a seasoning in a lot of different styles of metal, like
it works really well.
It works really well. It's like, like, that's something that comes from black metal. Maybe I should go listen to black metal. And then I say, yes, you should.
Yeah, I'm glad it's coming around, because these injections of that in these bands are all like the good stuff of black metal, the best parts of black metal.
The creepy atmosphere, the fucking dissonance, kind of makes shit cold and grim. We love that shit.
Yeah, which of course it's going to work into any kind of metal. That's dark and grim. That's what Sabbath is. So what the whole fucking foundation is. Dark and grim. So why wouldn't it?
So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our store is there. We still need to restock on stuff. We will eventually get down to that. But our Patreon link is also there, so if you'd like to help us out there, it would be much appreciated.
And we're still going to keep these announcements for Denver Death Fest rolling out. Getting really psyched for this show. We got a lot of cool acts and bands that I hadn't heard of that I checked out. And I'm digging it. So I'm looking forward to April 20th. Check out denverdeathfest.com for all the tickets and information. It's all right there. Nate does a fantastic job with the website. So thank you, Nate. Thank you, Zach from Swinging Noose, for dealing with our shit.
And, of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It is amazing to see this channel grow. Probably more than it should. Like, this is getting dangerous, guys. What the fuck are you doing? Like, seriously, more people are watching us. We are corrupting literally anyone that watches us. You'll all catch the dumb eventually. Plenty of stuff we're working on here. We're getting close to getting the crowbar ranking done. And at the end of that, we will be announcing our next batch of rankings, which, believe me, those are going to be some really interesting ones. But yeah, plenty of stuff coming down the pipe, so definitely stay tuned. And with that, I will thank you one more time, because you've been good, and we will catch you later.